So we're here to talk about fee proposals and charging. I want to say a big thank you to Leo Wood, for organising this or helping me to organise it and introducing me to the group. So thank you so much, Leo. You have been enormously helpful.
My pleasure.
I understand happiness is an exquisite fee proposal. It sounds a bit giddy, but actually, I think my early days of practice were traumatic in places because I hadn't got this quite right. And then when you do ultimately get into your pace with it, it makes such a difference. So I hope that I'm going to be able to give you some decent tips today as we walk through the materials. So the agenda for the presentation is I'm going to begin by building a foundation of theory. This is probably stuff that you already know, but I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page, and that, just so that we're keeping consistent terminology before I get into the actual nitty-gritty. So setting the scene first, and then I'm going to talk you through how I prepare a fee proposal. And I've got some documentation that I've made to demonstrate this. And I'm also really happy to share these documents with you too. So I hope you'll find those useful. So a very quick introduction to me. I'm 27 years an interior designer. I started out in the industry working for other people. And in fact, one of my very first colleagues, I think, is here today. So it's been a long time in the industry. I have been for 20 years a teacher at KLC. I was ultimately director there, but at the same time, I kept my design practice running, and I managed to do that because I just had the most fantastic business partner. So I've had this sort of parallel track where I have seen many thousands of designers graduate, and I've had the privilege really of observing their careers and seeing what works and what perhaps isn't quite so successful. So my new business is Recipe for a Room, and my aim is to help working designers to avoid mistakes, to fix their frustration, but most of all, to sort of leapfrog to a higher level of business and hopefully accelerate their business success. So that's me. Now, moving on to the subject today, the first thing I want to look at is setting the scene for design proposals. Now, I've got a model here. I've stolen this model pretty much lock, stock and barrel from the RIBA Plan of Works. I think you need a model to demonstrate the design process within your practice so that you can talk clients through it, and so that you have you use consistent terminology in your paperwork and so on. So this is plagiarized from RIBA. It sets various phases of design. We've got pre-design, design, construction and supply, snagging, and handover. Now, obviously, not every job contains all of these elements. So I'm thinking about very large jobs, sort of full service interior design practice. Obviously, the pre-design starts with the preliminary meeting, taking the brief, feasibility. Does the client have realistic aims? Is it going to be possible? Do you think that you'll work well together? It's a two-way conversation that you have with the client at this point. And assuming that you think it's a good project and you want to work on it, then your response to this phase is to produce the fee proposal. So this is when we're talking about the fee proposal. We then go through conceptual design. We work that through with the client. They approve that. We develop that. We provide estimates against that. And then once the client is happy both with the design and the likely cost, we get into producing the technical specifications that are going to enable other professionals to come in and work on the project with us. We might have two different stages of design then running concurrently. So both construction running at the same time as supply. And then finally, we move over into the snagging stage and the handover to the client. So really helpful to have a model for your business that is, how you describe the design process to your clients. Now, I just wanted to say something about the preliminary meeting, because I often get asked, do you charge for the preliminary meeting? And the answer is yes, I do. Now, I do tend to make a distinction between what I think of as cold clients and warm clients. So a cold client is someone I've never heard of before we somehow get connected. I don't know their intentions. And I really want to be able to sort of separate out the real clients from the vexatious. So I find that charging my hourly rate for this meeting is a good way of separating out people who are serious about and who value interior design services. I occasionally make an exception with a warm client. So if a warm client is someone who is maybe introduced to me by an architect that I've worked with in the past, and I know that they're already down the road with this client, that the client is sincere, and I might just go and have a really nice conversation with them and not attach any cost to it. I always give my very best. I don't keep anything back at these meetings. I demonstrate my value. I know that I've got lots more in the tank to give them in the event that they decide to progress with me. So that is how that first meeting would go. So the phases of design are shown on the screen. This is how I describe the process to my clients so that they can begin to understand and to develop expectations around what they're getting into and what they're going to get from me. Okay, so the second thing that I want to touch in as we're building our foundation before we get into the nitty-gritty is the different ways of charging. I'm sure that this is familiar to all of you, but I just want to make sure that we all understand the terminology and we have the same understanding of the different terms. So as designers, we tend to operate in two different modes. We have a mode of designing and we have a mode of supplying. And the way we charge for each of those different modes of business is subtly different. So just going through those quickly, under the design fees, obviously the first option that we have is to charge an hourly rate. Now, this is nice for us because we get paid for all of the time that we put into the job. It's very good for small jobs where, you know, actually taking the time to produce a fee proposal would take half the time of the job. So, you know, we don't want to get into that. And it's never going to run away with itself. It's a small contained project. You have to keep detailed records, but then you should be doing that anyway. But as these projects get bigger, there's a balance. Your clients can start to get a bit stressed by it because they worry that they're essentially getting themselves into some kind of open-ended contract. And certainly managing a large project on this basis is likely to be onerous. So that's where our just charging by the hour sits in the great scheme of things. Now, I think some of you have found this already, but on my website, I have an hourly rate calculator. It's a free Excel spreadsheet that you can download. And it's preloaded with a number of different considerations that you can input. I think I'm getting some interference. I don't know if somebody's got their mic on, but sorry. Yes, so the hourly rate calculator, you can input your needs and your business model, and it will pop out a rate that you should be charging at the end. I've got a couple of comments about that. First of all, if you're relatively new, relatively inexperienced, then when you're inputting the desired salary, you should obviously keep that at the lower end, you know, the sort of salary that you would expect to earn as a beginner. Similarly, if you're working part-time, then you need to put in a fractional salary and not aim for a full-time salary for part-time work, because that's going to spew out the wrong hourly rate for you. So, but do take a look at that, because I think it's really helpful in helping you to think through what you should be charging. So that's your hourly rate. Now, next up, we have a fixed fee. Now, fixed fee is often based on the hourly, was usually based on the hourly rate. Now, there are two types of fixed fee, and I'm talking about one in particular. So when I first started practicing, we used to work on a fixed fee where we'd tell a client that for £250 fixed, we would design a room for them. And it was a loss leader, because what we were hoping to do was capture the retail business and the other side of that, and we'd make up for the time that we had spent on the design. I'm not. Sorry, we've got I'm not talking about that kind of fixed fee. I'm talking about carefully calculated, your services by the hour, wrapped into an overall package that covers everything. So that is the fixed fee that I'm talking about here. Now, so ideally with this, you get paid for all your time, but I have some comments to make about that, and I'm going to come back to it. This is fantastic for a large job over a longer period of time. So you can settle into it. It can become a regular payment. So this can be great for a larger job. I'm going to talk to you about how I stage these payments, because effectively, when I've worked on larger jobs, I've been working on a retainer. So I'll talk about how I've managed that. And clients often like this because it's finite. It gives an amount of money where they feel confident that that's roughly what they're going to end up spending. The final mode of charging for the design fee bit, it's not a way that I have worked in the past, but I know that there are people here who charge in this way, and it's charging a percentage of the overall contract value. Now, I find it fascinating that the three ways of charging, either charging retail, charging a fixed fee based on time, or charging a percentage of contract, in the end, normally they all come out at the same price for the client. They all tend to work out roughly the same price. And I've got some comments to make about that later on as well. So this is another method of charging that is finite. It gives the client a knowable amount of money that they're expecting to pay. And if you have clients who are used to working with architects, this is how architects charge. And so your clients might be very comfortable with this. It might be very familiar to them. So perhaps it's a way of thinking about working with clients of architects. It can be viewed by the client as incentivizing a slightly higher spend. So if you're charging a percentage and you manage to push up the overall contract value, then you'll be pushing up the fee that you get as well. So you have to manage your clients quite carefully in that respect. And regardless of how you charge, there should always be a wash up at the end of every project that you do to calculate how much time did you put into it, and did you get paid for that time? And then you can adjust your fee proposal for the next job and make sure that, you know, you're always getting better and better as you go along. Now, I noted online that I think House and the BIID ran a survey, oh gosh, 4 years ago now, but asking interior designers who charged by percentage of contracts what percentage they charged. I think the average is more like 12 to 15%, but they found a spread of 6 to 20%. So that's, you know, the ballpark where this sits. It is a minority of designers who charge in this way. So I think for, you know, every 3 designers who charge a fixed fee, there's 1 designer who charges by percentage of contract value. So it works out in that sort of order of things. Now, getting on to supply, this is really critical, because now you start to get into legal machinations and potential jeopardy or liability for you. So there are 2 main ways of charging for supply. The first is a percentage markup on trade prices, and the second is working with retail prices. And I'll just talk a little bit about how each of those wash out. First one is percentage markup. Now, this is where you act as an agent for the client. You are enabling the client's purchasing. They might transfer lumps of money to you. You might buy on their behalf, but it's explicit to everybody in the transaction that you're an agent. So the contract essentially is between the client and the supplier. And in the event that anything goes wrong, it's the supplier that has the liability. It allows you to operate with complete transparency. I think the greatest frustration I had in my early days of practice was not being paid for my time. But actually, once I got that sorted, I really enjoyed having a business model that allowed me to say, I can get this stuff for you. I charge this markup. In my case, it varied between 10 and 20%. I would charge 10% on stuff that I thought was easy and 20% on things that were sort of related, that had some greater degree of difficulty, often related to kitchens and bathrooms. But I really felt like you can buy it from me or not. And if you want to get it yourself, that's fine. And you can take, that's going to create some hassle and you can have the hassle for that. So that's absolutely fine. But it meant that when I went to Chelsea Harbour or when I went into a showroom with a client, if the showroom assistant accidentally quoted the trade price, I didn't then have a sort of major problem. So I love working transparently. It's really clean and simple, but and it is a great marketing strategy. And I'm going to come back to that. It does, however, usually represent a lower level of profit on the supply side of the job. So there's a question for you about, what your preference is in the way that you operate your services. Working with retail pricing, where the buck stops with you and the client regards you as the supplier, often provides higher profits. It is the traditional interior design model, so it's the one that I started my career using, but it can make you vulnerable to lost sales in the event that the client decides to shop around and finds the same item at a lower price from a different supplier. And obviously with things like Google reverse image search, that's just so easy today. You can put a photograph of anything into Google and it'll tell you exactly where to buy it. So everything has changed in that respect. However, most of us operate on a mixed model. There are certain businesses I work with, I trust them, I have a long working relationship with them. So for example, upholstery or soft furnishings, curtain makers. And I'm very happy to say that that product comes from my business because I feel like the jeopardy that's associated with that is limited. And I can charge a retail price on that, but I then assume all of the responsibility for that, for its future functioning, for client satisfaction and so on, all comes back to me. Other stuff, everything else, I would supply at trade plus a markup. So I would be operating as an agent and only sometimes operating as a principal. So that tends to be, I think, well, that's how I work. And obviously it's the recommendation that I make. So just looking at the stages of design and how you might charge for them, obviously for the pre-design, an hourly rate is perfect. For the design phase, depending on how long the project is likely to be, you could charge an hourly rate, you could charge a fixed fee, you could charge a percentage of contract value, and the same for the rest of the project. And then we have those other two options for supply of a percentage markup or charging a retail price. So those are our charging options. So now I'm going to get into the final third leg of the foundation that we're building, which is looking at the fee proposal itself, the contents of the fee proposal. And then I'm going to get on to telling you exactly how I would do it. Okay, so the fee proposal is a hefty package. It's got lots of information in it. It has a cover letter. It guides your client to what the design process is. It includes a schedule of the services that you're going to be providing, bespoke to them. It provides the fee that you're going to charge. It comes with a contract or has associated terms and conditions. It hopefully also has some nice marketing materials to encourage the client to work with your business. And because I'm an optimist, it also comes with a first invoice. So it's a signpost to the client that this is what is now needed to move into the next phase of the design process. Now, I don't know if you can see, actually, I've got some numbers on the top right hands of some of these slides. I've got 5 documents that I've made to support this presentation. They're very rough, they're draft documents, they might have some typos, but I needed to write them so that I could be absolutely certain that I had got everything into this presentation. And like I said, later on, very happy to share these with you, so I'll come back to that. First up, we have a cover letter. Now, the cover letter thanks the client for the opportunity of working with them. It provides evidence that you've listened to them and that you've understood their desires, their aspirations for this project, what they're hoping to achieve. It expresses your interest in their project. You know, why would you particularly like to work on this when you could be working on other things? It describes the services that in your professional capacity, you have decided are the optimal services to get them to where they want to go. It signposts the next steps. And I have got a bar in the way, which means that I can't read the final point, but I think the final point was that it has a, a presumptive, an assumptive close. So I always, when I write these letters, I just assume I've got the job. And so I finish by saying how much I'm looking forward to working with the client, because I think these mindset things are really helpful in making things happen, actually making things work. So that's the cover letter. That's the first part of the fee proposal. Then we have a guide to the process, because as far as, you know, if your client hasn't worked with an interior designer before, this could be some great mystery to them, exactly what you're going to supply and how and when you're going to do it. So the guide to the process is based on that model that I showed you back at the beginning of the presentation. I've made it a little bit more friendly. It's a little bit less technical, but it explains the design process in simple terms. It helps to manage expectations, so your client understands what they are going to get, but it doesn't promise stuff that they aren't going to get. It helps to demonstrate your value, because most clients probably have no idea just how much is involved in getting to a finished design proposal. It encourages confidence because it shows that you understand that they need guidance. It shows that you understand the design process and that you know what's involved. It confirms your professionalism. It makes no unrealistic commitments. I'm just going to get rid of that bar. And it helps set up the schedule of services. So because we're going to then, major part of the fee proposal is a finite list. Oh gosh, sorry, that's the doorbell. A finite list of the things that you're going to be doing for the client. Because when we have a finite list of things we're going to do for our clients, we don't get drawn off into doing other things as well. The contract is very specific. And it's called a schedule of services in this package, because I'm going to be talking to you about the RIBA BIID contract, which is something that you may use or you may want to use. And within that contract, they use the term schedule of services. But in other places, you might see this described as a scope of work. So this is your scope of work, or the basis of your scope of work, or the schedule of services that you're going to create. Okay, next up is the schedule of services itself. And again, I've got the documentation that I've made to share this with the client, to explain to the client what they're going to get. And the nice thing about this is it prevents mission creep. So you probably can't read what's here on the slide, but the first section, the little narrow section, is actually defining the zones of the project. So it's very specifically saying this room, this room, this room, and this room. And it means that you don't get into, oh, while you're here, could you have a look at other rooms, that then get a bit grey about whether or not they were actually part of the job. Again, it helps to share just how much work you're going to be doing. This is preparing the client for the likely scale of fees that you're going to have to charge. It is so counter to the fluffy stereotype that some people have of interior design practice. This is all about demonstrating your business skills. And it quantifies the deliverables. So this is what I'm going to supply. If it's on the list, I'm supplying it. If it isn't, we could talk about that. You know, we could add to it. And it really helps to justify your fee. Then the next part of the package, and actually I've put the schedule of services and the fee together in one document. You can separate them out, you can have them in one document, that's up to you. But then we get into the fee itself. It's a clear presentation to the client of the total outlay for your services. It explains whether it's all payable in one lump or whether you're going to spread it over a period of time. It's very specific about what is and isn't included within this particular proposal. And also within this, I would confirm my hourly rate. Now, I've based all of this on an hourly rate of £75 an hour. I think that's probably at the low end. I think the average is these days, I don't know, 75 to 150, something like that for a sort of standard interior design hourly rate. But this is all based on £75 an hour. It quantifies the number of meetings that you're going to have. To get from start to finish will include X number of meetings, each of X duration. And that means that if more meetings are needed, they can be added in at your hourly rate, which you've confirmed. Now, it broaches on target timing. So it moves ever so slightly towards suggesting or hinting at a target time, but it doesn't commit to it, because we all know, you know, what can happen to timing with the best will in the world. But it does give your client some kind of understanding of the period of time that you think this is going to realistically take. And when I write these, I include a potential for project extension, because as far as I'm concerned, the worst thing that can happen to me is that I get trapped in a fixed fee for a project that is running on endlessly, where my input is still expected, but it's months since I myself expected to have moved on to do something else. So I allow within this paperwork the opportunity to discuss an extension in the event that a third party or reasons beyond my control make the project run on longer than we're all expecting. So I would include that within this paperwork. So then we get into contracts and terms and conditions. On the right-hand side of the slide, possibly a document that you're all familiar with. If you're not, there's a link there to download a specimen of this RIBA BIID 2020 professional contract. I really recommend that you take a look at it and you read it, because it's got notes up front, which are brilliant at highlighting the legislation that affects design practice, so that you can make sure that you're familiar with that. And it also has a checklist for you to make sure that you're acting professionally, to make sure that all of the things, the professional considerations, that you're aware of them and that, yes, they're under control. It hasn't been updated yet because I think it was last October, the Building Safety Act came in, and that is going to have further implications for practice. But it does mention construction design management and other retail related legislation, which could ultimately have an effect on your practice. So take a look at that. This is a contract that you can download. You can use, I think they're about 40 or 50 pounds each. You probably need 2 of them for a project, one for you to sign, one for the client to sign, so that you can each have a copy. It's tick box, it's not perfect, but it is really well drafted, and it's a great basis for a big job. So if you've got a large project where you want to be really tightly tied up legally, then this is a really good start. So it protects you and your client. It helps you to understand your duties and obligations. It ties everything down tightly. It establishes professional boundaries. So I think one of the final parts in this document is it talks about your hours of operation. So it says, I work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, which is obviously, when you're thinking about boundaries with your client, it's really good to establish that so that you can keep your weekends for yourself. Now, while I was preparing this, I spoke to a gentleman called Colin Jones. I have no affiliation with them. I'm not related to this business. But he was one of the advisors who helped on the drafting of this documentation. And his business, which is HCR, helps designers to write terms and conditions and also to make modifications to contracts and so on. And the way that they work is, if you were to get in touch with him, he would sort you out with one of his colleagues, and you could have a free introductory phone call to discuss your particular concerns. He said often that introductory phone call clears up the question that the designer might have. So very useful. Alternatively, if you do need further legal services, then the next thing they would do is they'd make you a fee proposal and tell you exactly what to expect and how much it would cost you to get the paperwork or the backup that you need. So the contract and all the terms and conditions in the event of a smaller project, very much an important part of the overall fee proposal package that you're going to be compiling. Then we get to the nice bit, because obviously we still want to try to sell our services to the client. So we might include some marketing materials, a brochure or a portfolio, client testimonials, very powerful, team biographies, other people that they might meet. Can be really helpful. Often a client might think that a colleague that they're working with is lower ranking or whatever. So it's good for them to know the credentials of the people that might answer the phone or might be also helping them. Any professional memberships that you have, perhaps if you have a code of conduct for your business or a mission statement, that could be included. And it's an opportunity, and I'm going to come back to this one as well, to impress the enormous value. I find it staggering, the enormous value of professional interior design services. Coming back to that one. Okay, and I throw in my first invoice. So I've done a lot of work. I don't charge to produce a fee proposal. It's an investment I make in bringing business into my business. But I do package it all up, and I make it quite clear that for us now to begin, here's my first invoice. Once I've received that, we'll start. That's the trigger to get it all started. Payable in advance. And again, signaling your confidence and professionalism. Okay, so now I'm going to move on. I'm going to tell you exactly how I prepare a fee proposal. Now, a small job is very simple. I would charge an hourly rate. I'm talking about maybe, a very simple scheme for a single room, where you really don't want to get into making an enormous package of documentation. And certainly, I think I would accompany that with terms and conditions. I wouldn't slam down a big contract on the desk as part of a very small job that was just a few hours of work. My supply would be mostly trade plus markup, perhaps a higher percentage markup for a smaller job and a lower percentage markup for a bigger job. And then retail prices for those businesses I'm happy to stand behind me and for me to represent. So making a decision on which of my colleagues or co-workers I would be happy to front for. When I get onto a large job, I calculate everything based on my hourly rate. Now I work on a fixed fee. So what I do is, and I'll show you the documentation. I've got this lined up right now. I work on a fixed fee. I decide everything I'm going to do for the client. I work out how much time that's going to take. I bundle it together. In a big job, it's an enormous amount of money, a large amount of money. And I also do some work on the target timing. So I think about, I'm going to take 4 months to do this. So I divide my fee by 4 months and I say, I'm going to charge you 4 monthly installments in advance. And that's how I roll out my design services. So I'm effectively on retainer and I know every month exactly what's going to come in. If it doesn't come in, then after a couple of days, I might have a polite chat with the client and just make sure they're happy. Is everything okay? And if it stops and it dries up, then I don't have to do any work on that project until it starts up again. And then we can look at timings and so on. But it's a really nice way to work. And that would be with a formal contract. If I'm going to be working on this larger job with this more complicated fee proposal. So where I start, I decide that by the time we're looking for a contractor to come in and give us a price for the entire rebuild or renovation or whatever it is, what documentation, what drawings, what presentations must we have, what specifications and schedules need to be produced to give to this party in order for them to price the ongoing work. So I specify absolutely everything. And then I reverse engineer from that great amount of stuff, I reverse engineer all the necessary tasks I'm going to have to do in order to get to that end result. So here's a horrible spreadsheet. It's scruffy, my own personal spreadsheet. Nobody ever gets to see it. And I have columns in this. Down the left-hand side column is every single step I'm going to take in order to get to what I think is the optimal end result. I have columns for smaller jobs that I'm going to calculate by hours, and I put my hourly rate next to that. And then column 4 is for days. So it's for jobs that are going to take bigger chunks of time and where I'm actually calculating on a day rate. And I think I've given the client a little bit of a discount for the day rate. So it's something like 6 hours rather than 7 or 8 hours. But that's up to you. You choose these rates. And then I have the total cost in time in the next column. I've got a big fat chunk of text down the right-hand side, which describes what I'm doing in each of these stages. I don't normally do that. I've done this for this presentation so that you can read it and understand what I was thinking when I wrote this. So I get to the end of this and I have a total time charge that is the time that I've calculated is going to get me from nothing to everything that the client needs in order to complete the project. The final items on this list are meetings, telephone calls, and a little bit of time set aside for revisions. Now, I tweaked this a bit. It's come to a rather helpful £19,950. It was actually 20,250 or something like that. But I've sat through numbers of board meetings where our marketing director is sworn that the horrible 29.99 theory does actually work. So I've shunted it down a little bit to make it fit neatly under the £20,000. And this is based on a £75 per hour rate. I have estimated, we'll come on to this, I've estimated a duration of this project, a target timing of 4 months to get this all done. So I divided it by 4, and I've come up with the number that is going to be the monthly payment in advance to get my fee, to get my design services started. Same spreadsheet, different tab. I've created a Gantt chart, and the Gantt chart, the column down the left-hand side, is just a cut and paste of the column down the left-hand side on the previous spreadsheet. So it's just those same tasks listed again over a period of time. And where I've said I'm going to give 2 days, I've blocked out 2 days. Where I've said I'm going to block out 8 days, I've blocked out 8 days. And I'm proving to myself that I do have time. I can fit this in to my busy schedule with my other clients, and this is when I'm going to do it. It gives me guidance for the client of how long this project is likely to take, but I don't tie myself to that. I don't undertake to commit to that. But that is how I know that I'm going to be spreading my fee over 4 months, because I've actually worked it out. Now, this spreadsheet that I've shown you, I've got a dotted line just after column 1. I never share the stuff over on the right-hand side. I do not share this with my client. I don't want to get into negotiations over, well, you said you need 2 days for this, but how about you do it in a day and a half? I'm not getting into that. So this is purely back office material, and it's a bit scruffy. I apologize for that, but I hope that it's helpful. So then this is how it informs my design proposal package. I take all of these services, all of these tasks, and they become my schedule of services. So they become the things I tell the client I'm going to do for them as part of the design fee. So I'm not telling them how much time I'm going to spend on it, only what I'm going to do. When I get to the calculation at the bottom, this is my fee proposal. This is the bit that I take into the fee section, along with the information for the client about over the period of time that it's going to be spread. So what period of time will it spread over? And the Gantt chart is informing that target timing. Now, I've used the term target timing because that's the terminology that's used in the RIBA BIID contract. So there's nothing, when you're seeing something for the first time as a client, you can get terribly confused if the designer uses different words for the same thing. So I'm trying to be consistent with the resources that I'm using and the terminology that I'm selecting to take into my own paperwork. Okay, so I don't know how we're doing for time. Oh, actually, not too badly. So timesheets, everybody should keep timesheets. Even if you're working by contract value, you need to be able to analyze your business after the event, make sure that you did get paid, and tweak your business model, tweak your next fee proposal, so that you can adjust it so that you can make sure that your business is only sort of going to get more and more profitable. Now, this is the marketing that I find really astounding. I know from multiple events where I have analyzed it that your client on their own, going to the shops, is going to pay the same roughly as if they use you and you supply to them at trade plus 10%, for example. So they are not, you can represent a saving to them. They can get a better outcome, they can get better products, and it doesn't even have to cost them as much as if they've just gone shopping retail to buy their stuff. I think this is such a powerful argument. And in fact, I've had on very big jobs, I've created a spreadsheet to prove to clients that this is the case. So I've quantified all of the stuff we're going to be buying, including things like curtaining per linear meter, flooring per square meter. I've gone through and put in all the likely prices that they're going to pay, and I've demonstrated that my fees are not going to push this beyond the retail price of the project. I don't know if that sounds like a slightly spivvy way of working, but I just think it's such a powerful argument to make, particularly if your client is resistant to a big upfront fee on the grounds that they're worried that things are going to be terribly expensive. So buying at the shops, buying retail, or working with a designer on a time-based fee and plus 10% markup, or 10 to 15% of contract value, on average, all ends up costing the client the same. In the meantime, you have prevented all kinds of cock-ups on site. You've organized them on a get it right first time basis. They haven't had to pay to have a wall knocked down that was in the wrong place and then rebuilt somewhere else and so on. So I think we can make a really compelling marketing argument to our clients about the value that we represent. I'm sorry if I'm banging on about that for a bit emphatically. So, problem. Your client is horrified by a large upfront design fee. You need to educate your client. You need to explain and prove the incredible value that your services represent. I know this is very simplistic. I'm just trying to sort of tackle these arguments. Problem, your business isn't profitable enough. Well, try asking for more. We all have a money mindset. It's the family that we grew up in. It's the way our parents thought about money. It's the way our partners think about money. It's not the same as the way your client thinks about money. Your client might not have any concerns about money at all, might not even cross their mind. So is it you that's actually holding back the profit of your business? Could you be looking at increasing the price of your services? Another solution, I know sounds very simplistic, but there are things that we can do to try to push our businesses in the right direction. Find clients who've got bigger budgets. If ultimately we're all working effectively for a sort of percentage of the contract, then we'll make more money if we can big up the size of the contract to begin with. Or turn yourself into a star designer, upskill, increase the focus on yourself, and make it possible to push up your hourly rate so that people will pay a premium for you. And that's another way that you can increase the profit of your business. Or you can turn yourself into a shop. So a lovely graduate of mine, Tiffany Duggan, also has now got a furniture side to her business. And you can obviously make greater profit on things that are being presented by you retail, as long as you have that confidence in the product and that you're prepared to stand behind it and take anything that might come back at you in the future with regard to the safety and the performance of the product. Finally, you could look at taking on more work by employing virtual assistants, by getting some freelance help into the business, or indeed by hiring additional hands and charging all of that extra time that you're clawing back at a higher rate than it's costing you to buy it in. So another possible way that you could increase the profitability of your business. So that is a very quick romp through fee proposals and charging. In a moment, I'm going to open the floor for questions. I have got these documents that I'm really happy to share. There is a cost for these documents, and the cost is, if you send me an email and say that you want them, I am going to add your email address to my contact list. And then I'm going to occasionally send you a newsletter, which I hope you'll find is full of really interesting information. So just to let you know that I do put email addresses for this kind of thing into my email list. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about is that hopefully later this year, probably the back end of April, I'm going to be running a live 5-week program, the aim of which is to look at a business across lots of different aspects of practice and to fine tune each of those different aspects with the aim of lifting the business up, of moving it ahead, and of increasing the profitability of the business. So it's going to be 5 aspects of business management, time management, client management, project management, and so on. I'm looking for a minimum of 5 participants, but I'm not going to take more than 20. It's going to take 5 weeks. It's going to be 5 hours per week commitment, 3 live and 2 doing homework of types. And the cost for this first time out, because we'll all be building it together, it'll be the first time that it's run, is going to be £500, which I think is going to be about half the price that I hope to promote it at eventually. So if you would like information about this, and if you want those documents that I've been showing you as part of this presentation, then I would be delighted to send them. Just send me an email and I will forward them to you. The other thing is I have been recording this and I'm going to put it up as a private video on YouTube. And I will also send you a link for that so that if you want to watch it again, then obviously it will be there for you to watch. So I don't think I need to do anything else. If anybody wanted to ask any questions or has any comments, I'd love to know what you think.